The Mayan calendar was due to end on December 21st, although an alternate method forecast December 23rd. Whatever the case, the world was in a frenzy, one much worse than when the end of the world had been predicted by the Jehovah's Witnesses in the 1990s. For radio, TV, and other electronic signals all over the world were all being disrupted by some unknown source. And there were the tremors. Commander Grandmasters East and West were already at the tow center in Hawaii when the President's CIA chief called in. East put it on speaker. "We can't track the source of the disturbing signals. My experts tell me that these signals are like none they've ever dealt with before. That whenever they think they're getting a fix on them, the waves relocate to a new and apparent source, which soon does the same. Also, the waves are at a frequency which can't, well, shouldn't even function for its range. If we could only get near to the source, even into its vicinity, we could then probably hone in on it. I've got planes crisscrossing the globe trying to localize it, but it will only be luck if we run into something stable. I've certified that the signals are not coming from space." "Bad news," East said, to no one in particular. "That means the signal doesn't want to be found," West added, "but which means that if we did find it, we could possibly turn it off or neutralize it somehow." The CIA speaker continued, "And I've got reports of small tremblers all over the world at once. That's unheard of. They're quite minor, and no quakes have been reported, but they've been increasing and spreading since yesterday. Could the world really be ending?" East replied, "Could be. The signals are of an alien nature. That's why you don't recognize them, and why they have such strange properties." West surmised, "So the radiating device was planted here ages ago when—" "The Earth was visited by them," East continued. "And the Maya somehow knew about it," added West. "And there's that unexplained ancient runway in South America," surmised East. "Who do we have on ancient symbols and megaliths?" West asked of the tow center director. "We have Lesky right here, and Frederick, who's out and about the island." Lesky piped up, "Sir, Frederick found some new glyphs on the rocks near the runway a while back, for they had removed the 20 feet of soil that had accumulated over the millennia, and there seemed to be drawings of some lakes carved therein. I can access Frederick's photo files." "Good," answered West, "and let's fetch the young master. He has the site." "My God," cried Lesky. "They are a much larger and detailed version of what I found at the end of the calendar stones at the Mayan ruins. Quick, match it to the globe, present and past," East pleaded. It was going to take some time to search all of the maps of the ages. Meanwhile, Frederick, surfing, heard the rotors and turned to see a black ninja helicopter approaching and then hovering about 2 feet off the ground, creating a mini sandstorm. A while later, Lesky reported, "I've got it, Grandmaster. It's the Central Lake District in Canada. Well, as it was a long time ago."
"I heard," chimed in the CIA chief. "I'll have an AWACS with a survey helicopter in it there within an hour." The action paused as they awaited the overflight of the suspect Canadian area. Grandmaster East asked for geographics of the site. Profat answered, "I've got it on Google Earth and Wikipedia. It's a region with forests so dense that the snow cannot even reach the ground, so all of the snow stays aloft on the treetops like a canopy. I wouldn't try to land on it." "Thanks," answered East. "I'll pass that along. They sure picked an almost impenetrable area." "Almost?" asked the prof. "We can go anywhere, get one of our helicopters into the region." Lunch was served. The CIA chief came back on. "Some of the electronics on my AWACS are going haywire and burning out, but we have a general location. We're dropping the chopper now to locate it, and my AWACS is getting out of there." The survey chopper dropped like a stone, the wind soon catching the rotors and stabilizing the craft, whose engines they soon started. All they can see is snow and ice. There's a forest underneath. "What the? I've got an infrared satellite coming over in 17 minutes. We just burned up half its fuel to get it there. What did the aliens want with us anyway?" "Not all things are solvable. We have no answer of what is probably now some long-abandoned agenda." "Geez." The CIA's survey helicopter headed off in the general direction of the strange signals. However, There came an avalanche of strange sensations as they began to narrow the source of the emanations, such as nausea, high heartbeats, a sense of suffocation, tight chests, panic, anxiety, and much more than they'd ever known in the strenuous training during flight school. Their very selves were fragmenting. One last effort reported all of this back to CIA command as the craft began its swan dive and crashed through the ice into the depths below. Mission failed and crashed. The crew reported some kind of extreme mental disturbances. Maybe your ninja craft with its mind-disciplined crew can get close enough to pinpoint the source. My guys were still 5 miles away. I hope so. We're about 7 minutes away from your copter's last location. Go for it. The ninja craft did make it much closer, to about 1,000 feet of the source, its crew also bearing the waves of unreality washing over their psyches, and then, too, they came to be on the verge of blacking out. Only the pilot's last bit of remaining logic stabbed at the autopilot, which carried the craft aloft and away to safety. We had to abort, but we've got the source to within 300 yards, reported East. They dropped a flare. We'll refocus the infrared satellite to that location. It can read a label on your clothes from space. Grandmaster West sat back in his chair and pondered during the brief interlude, looking about the room of the dedicated tow questers. Who can we send, he thought, and how much time do we have? Sir, a Russian jet fired 3 missiles toward the target, but their electronics and guidance systems fizzled and fried, the missiles winging away erratically and plowing into the ice like harmless duds. East interjected, "If it's of an alien race from another star that can conquer space, then it's no wonder that our primitive electronics can be thwarted." The satellite's data came streaming in, a 5-minute high-definition video of the device and its glowing control panel. Frederick walked in the door, noting the video just beginning to play, and studied it intensely until it ended. One of the symbols in the middle had been changing rapidly, and another one too, but only every so often. "It matches no known language, font, or number system," said Frederick. "That's true," answered an associate. "We just put it through the translator." "My kingdom for a Rosetta Stone," replied the tow center director. "We have 4 hours or so," answered Frederick. "I identified its 0 character and then deduced the rest from their structure and form, and from the sequence of the rapidly changing symbol. It's a timer that has advanced 6 minutes in the 5 minutes that we watched it. It's on its way down to all zeros." Frederick sat down and went into a trance-like state. Someone came over. "No," said West. "Leave him be." The CIA came back on. "Have your craft clear the area. We have a super stealth inbound at 1,000 miles an hour. The President has authorized a tactical nuclear strike. 10 minutes to arrival." "We're already clear, but the strike won't work," answered East. "It's worth a try." A while later, Frederick looked up from his reverie. "What did you see?" asked West of Frederick. "I saw the blankness of no earth, and a dim vision of a woman walking in the dark with a flashlight through a forest overcrowded with trees. That's all. Sorry." West addressed the room. "No sorry, Frederick, for that's what we have to do. Who do we have that can approach this thing that so much disrupts human functioning?" Prof offered. "Cynthia on our TowQuest team has often reported on her numerous episodes of this disturbing nature and has apparently acclimated to them."
The snowcat was soon off and following the GPS signal for a 7-mile trip in the Canadian snow forest, it barely squeezing through some of the gaps in the trees. They still had communication with Oahu, but it was slight and fading with their every advance. 45 minutes passed. There was 1 hour left. Trouble. A wake of nausea swept over them and prompted them to take their next dose of seasickness pills, but the meds weren't helping anymore. They spotted some shapes in the snow and dusted them off and soon radioed the tow center, as they had been doing periodically. "Hello, Cynthia," answered Grandmaster East. "Wherefore art thou?" "We've covered 4 miles somehow in this entangled forest. We are finding skeletons on the ground, some human and some animal, and I see many more up ahead." East replied, "I'm afraid that all who wandered and entered there have perished, probably scared to death. It's up to you, Cynthia." "The world needs me and I need me," she said, clicking off the radio. They drove on for a while, sometimes having to traverse over the bones of the many unfortunates. A haze of distorted beings soon enveloped them, After another mile, sending their brain traffic neurotransmitters spinning, struggling to maintain control. They tried hard to ignore the visions and emotions washing over them, straining to focus. She had been here many times before, though, cleansing the intrusions, but it was new to the driver, and he soon began his collapse. The cat burrowing into foliage of a bush, whose color was ever-during green, the renowned color of sanity. He stood up, then fell again. She dragged him back a few hundred feet, where at last he revived a bit, but looked groggy. Her gestures directed him back whence they'd come. He resisted, loyal to the mission, although quite unable to proceed. They tried the radio, but it had gone silent. "It is for me to go the last mile alone, my friend." Finally, he agreed and headed back. Back at the tow center, we've lost contact. The snowcat was soon off and following the GPS signal for a 7-mile trip, it barely squeezing through some of the gaps in the trees. They still had communication with Oahu, but it was slight and fading with their every advance. 45 minutes passed. There was 1 hour left. Trouble. A wake of nausea swept over them and prompted them to take their next dose of seasickness pills. But the meds weren't helping anymore. They spotted some shapes in the snow and dusted them off, and soon radioed the tow center, as they had been doing periodically.
Cynthia retrieved the snowcat and drove on, the snow forest getting denser, her hallucinations increasing by the minute. The visions were now accompanied by horrible sounds. She was hearing the workings and meanderings of her own affected brain and mind, something never meant to be heard and endured for very long. She drove on quickly, the branches whipping her, until the forest became too dense for the snowmobile. She got off. The shards of early man now appeared, formed, and then shattered, as the primitive brainstem began failing in its task to sort out human-radiated reality from all else that was out there. She was no longer totally sapiens, but Homo habilis, then erectus, and now, hopefully, handyman. Taken aback, she fell to her knees, overwhelmed, and began to focus on the outlines of the trees and branches, desperately attempting to bring her mind to attention, an old trick she'd learned, to quell panic attacks. But this was the last frontier of horror, even considering what she'd been through in her life. Somehow she got up and continued walking, now privy to all of Earth's invisible radiation, but soon adapted, learning to put much of it out of her mind. She could even hear the noise of thermal vibrations as she moved on. Cynthia next felt the actual emotion of death and dying via suffocation, but again, through previous practice, noted that she was indeed still breathing in and out, and so she waved death's winged ebon form aside. Waves of adrenaline now swept her body from head to foot, and she nearly fainted and sat down, in case she did faint, not wanting to bang her head on a rock. She arose slowly, to avoid the hypertension of quick-rising blood pressure. Her heartbeat had to be around 180 now, and this actually helped her along. But too much of this and she would be no more. 20 minutes left. Cynthia stopped and meditated, trying to focus on nothing to quiet the intrusive thoughts, as she'd learned to do. It didn't work here as well as it had elsewhere, so she switched to another alternate method, which was to watch the maddening thoughts go by, as if in a parade, but not taking them in or entertaining any of them. They appeared, marched across, and exited, stage right, all unattended to by the witness, her consciousness, for she was now sitting in the audience, way in the back row. As for some thoughts that wouldn't leave at all, she colored them dim and gray, and as such they dissolved into a fog, losing their importance. She got up, her heartbeat perhaps now down to 140, but many nightmares and their foals were still passing on by, as wide-awake dreams, such as in schizophrenia. It was almost too much. Her very self was beginning to disintegrate, she desperately trying to hold on to that last bit of logic in a back corner of her mind somewhere, a mind that was being overwhelmed with unreality. She stumbled on, heading in the direction of increasing sickness, her only means of navigation. What's that? She turned off her light, for there was a glow in the distance. That was it. 10 minutes left.
10 minutes left in the snow forest. The pressure upon her sense of self grew worse as she approached the glow. Logic's last gleam was fading, for life's last light was now upon her. Cynthia was only 10 feet away when waves of confusion washed all thinking away. She fell forward a few more feet and collapsed, so close. She didn't know it yet, but she had entered a zone of safety, one that perhaps the device itself needed to be free to function unaffected by its own emanations. Her head spun round and round as consciousness returned, another familiar sensation, but one that was never very pleasant. 4 minutes left. The mental disturbances were gone now, but she still reeled from their ravages. She felt cold for the first time, then freezing. Her body had been overloaded. Its thermostat was not functioning well. It took her a minute to regroup. She'd known cold winters before. She willed her body to function. She stood up and faced the alien device. There was a switch. She turned it off. The glow lights dimmed, and the machine began to fade. Then into oblivion went. Was it really happening, or was it a hallucination? She reached out her hand to where the device was, and felt nothing. She lay down to surrender to the night of death and fell asleep in the Crystal Palace, her tomb to be. Back at the tow center, all looked to the clock. There were 3 minutes left. As the countdown neared 0, nearly everyone tensed. East looked at West. It's been fine, this life. Indeed. At 0, nothing happened. The CIA called and reported. The tremors have stopped, but for the Earth settling back in, all emanations have ceased. It's over. Cynthia awoke, her cheeks flushed and pink with bloom, but she knew that it was but endorphins flooding her brain and body, as one last gift from the angel of light that is always given to the dying, so that the darker angel of death would not quickly approach one so fair. She closed her eyes, drifting back off towards the netherworld, but then felt some snowflakes falling on her cheek. But it can't snow in here, she thought. The ninjas above were hacking through the ice canopy with pickaxes, showering her with a cooling spray where she lay in her crystalline cathedral. A bright light shone through the hole above, and a rope came down, followed by some black forms. They wrapped her in blankets of electric warmth, then placed her in a harness, and she was lifted up and into the heated heaven of the helicopter. The tow center erupted in cheers, having watched on screen.
"What happened?" inquired the CIA chief a few minutes later. Cynthia turned it off with 3 minutes left, and the alien thing just evaporated. Just evaporated, that's it? She just turned it off, 3 minutes early, not even near 0? This was not in 007 movie. Ah, but you only live twice, once when you're born, and again when you stare death in the face. Perhaps mankind will take some pause from this, valuing life more, said East or West. Yes, indeed. Perhaps it has scared the hell out of everyone. I'm still not sure what to make of all this. Not all things are knowable. We looked for the device afterward. It was gone. There was no trace, but you do have a video of it. Well, thanks for your help. I don't know how you did it, but you sure pulled this one out of your butts. Great anal OG. I'm afraid we don't really know how we did it either. It's beyond me. Now, about the news media and that alien thing, it never happened. Yes, I guess it never did, for it's no longer there. Cynthia's sodium level was way down due to her recent stress, but this time she and all were ready for the fragmentation of her psyche that was to come again as a near-death experience, NDE. Last time she had gone back a mere 34,000 years, but she had still been in both shock and awe at what she could dredge up, and so she had ventured no further. She was now safely in the hospital, but the sodium drop had already begun a cascade of events that had called upon death to continue to knock at her door, while also revealing the brain's hidden recesses to her consciousness. Opiate endorphins flooded her brain. She was happy and high and could see everything that ever was. I can see into the life of things. She searched back almost 700 million years, although not really knowing how far. Had there been some early trace of humanity's humble beginnings back there? There were dinosaurs, among them Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Thesaurus, and Brontosaurus towering and dwarfing all else. I am a goner, but at least I'll enjoy the ride. She leapt ahead 10,000 years. The dinos were still dominant. Another day, another sun going down. Then she peered way ahead. 1 million years. They were still there, their numbers having increased, and some of them even flew. We should have been home by now. Where are we? She jumped way ahead, 50 million years. They still covered the earth, devouring all, ever feeding. By what hand were these eternal monsters made to rule the world?
Where was Proto-Man? He should have appeared by now. There was going to be trouble. They were beautiful beasts, but she felt no kinship with them. I am not of thee. Sensing their invulnerability, she dared to move tremendously ahead. 500 million years. There were now untold varieties and numbers of dinosaurs. They exhaled the very breath of eternity, that of the never-ending. They were the kings and queens of forever. It looked as if humankind would never make it. I will look for us near rivers deep, clear and wide. Those shores were empty of early man, and filled with swimming monsters. However, something was amiss. The air was rather hazy. She looked but a decade ahead. The monsters were all dead or dying. Their eyes were as blank and empty as paradise. She glanced but another decade further. They were all gone. A stellar nursery, the Pleiades, has just appeared in the night sky. A nervous, shrew-like night creature darted out into the open, in the daytime. I know you. All too soon, in one way, Miss Cynthia received the life-saving spinal injection, for she was about to traverse back from prehistoric man right on up through Homo sapiens. But at least, death would have to come back another day. Poet to poet, Austin and Cynthia rendered the details of Cynthia's journey, he visiting her in the wilderness, into the final CIA report, through the highest power of language, poetry, one that tries to flesh the truth in living words finely dressed. Crystal memories from spring to winter. From her hilltop cabin of logs, Cynthia recalls the ice, once in her veins, the freeze. Lo, the Canadian lilacs have bloomed at last. Nature springs from winter's tomb, the bloom already in the seed, the tree already contained within the acorn. Crystal fragments remain, sharp memories of the ventures in which she shattered not. Surging sprigs sprout from the soil, spring showers make the summer flower. All the seasonings arrive at her door, for all things come round to those who observe. Summer wakes from spring's dying kiss, blooming when the rose does, sunning after the spring's running. She could never be too warm, for she'd endured the frost. The kaleidoscope revolves, life's cycle. Summer rains upon the land, eventually fading in the night. Life's second bloom shines upon middle age, colors her mind, its rainbows shimmering. Autumn falls as summer leaves, harvesting its sum of days, seconding the rose of spring. The hearthstone fire glows heartily with herself as she stokes the flames of the wandering soul. The smile meets the tear. Fall's embers last through December. It snows atop the trees, ne'er falling in, entombing a spring that waits for the miracle. Ice winds stalk the weed flowers, the ghosts frosting the dead stalks, snow crystals barring all that grows. She's in the cabin safe, snug, warm, and whole. Winter is death cooled over. Melting snows feed spring waters.
Later, using the Grandmaster's pass, Austin filed the full account, after all had read it, into the tube of Secrets of That Never Happened, one that led to the vault, 20 miles down into the earth. He noted the maintenance stairway beside it, where none had ever gone, and looked in. The master knew he would, to see it spiral down into Neverland. So strangely compelling it was that he ventured down, underground, beyond all sight and sound. To learn the secrets, what is and ever was, one must brave the crypt and ghost of cause. So into the deep he went without pause, to look down, ever down, no self to keep, through birth, death, and the shade of sleep, through paths unkempt, underswept to the deep, through the cloudy strife of this hazy life, past the realm of the things which seem or are, even o'er the steps of the remotest bar. Down, down, where the mind whirls round and round, down, down. As the ear draws the sound, as the eye the light, as the dark the fright, beyond all death, despair, love and sorrow, past yesterday, today and tomorrow. The body's guide but the spirit of the soul. Down, down, through the fog, the knot and the void. Down, where reigns the night and the air is thin, to where sky and stars are not but within, where the radiant have not their throne, where there are some pervading all alone. Down, down, to the fathoms of the cryptic. Down, down, where substance slept with arithmetic, toward the spark yet nursed by embers, to the first and last that life remembers, to seek the gem that shines, the wealth of minds, the jewels so treasured by thee and thine. Down, down, we guide thee, we must carry thee. Down, down, we're illumination beside thee. Fear not the proof, it's the beauty of truth. Here the enigma of the immortal is undone and unloosed through life's portal. The theory of everything mortal, the idea that we've opened the door to. Crystal memories, the seasonings, from spring through winter. From her hilltop cabin of logs, Angelina recalls the ice once in her veins, the freeze. Lo, the Canadian lilacs have bloomed at last. Nature springs from winter's tomb, the bloom already in the seed, the trees within the acorns. Crystal fragments remain, sharp memories of the ventures in which she shattered not. Surging sprigs sprout from the soil. Spring showers make the summer flower. The seasons arrive at her door, in turn, for all things come round to those who observe. Summer wakes from spring's dying kiss, blooming when the rose does, sunning after the spring's running. She could never be too warm, for she'd endured the frost. The kaleidoscope revolves, life's cycle. Summer rains upon the land, eventually fading in the night. Life's second bloom shines upon middle age, colors her mind, its rainbows shimmering. Autumn falls as summer leaves, harvesting its sum of days, seconding the rose of spring. The hearthstone fire glows heartily with herself as she stokes the flames of the wandering soul. The smile meets the tear. Fall's embers last through December. It snows atop the trees, ne'er falling in, entombing the spring that waits for the miracle. Ice winds stalk the weed flowers, the ghosts frosting the dead stalks, snow crystals barring all that grows. She's in the cabin safe, snug, warm, and whole. Winter is life cooled over, melting snows feed spring waters.
In the grand theater of existence, how do the seasons influence the rhythm of our lives? Perched upon a hilltop, in a cabin of sturdy logs, our protagonist Cynthia reflects on the frosty chill that once coursed through her veins. The Canadian lilacs, symbolizing the arrival of spring, finally bloom, signaling the end of winter's icy reign. It's as if nature itself springs forth from a tomb, the potential for life inherent in the tiniest seed, the mightiest of trees encapsulated within humble acorns. Remnants of ice, sharp as crystal, serve as poignant reminders of the trials she navigated without breaking. As spring showers nourish the earth, sprigs of life sprout from the soil, their growth promising the beauty of summer blooms. The cyclical rhythm of nature ensures that each season takes its turn at her doorstep. This is the reward for those who watch and wait, the understanding that all things come full circle. Summer awakens, its birth heralded by the dying kiss of spring. Roses bloom, the sun shines, and the world is bathed in warmth. For someone who has endured the bitter cold, the heat can never be too intense. The kaleidoscope of life spins, each rotation marking the passage of seasons. Summer's reign, while glorious, cannot last forever. It fades away, surrendering to the inevitable night. This second bloom of life paints her mind with vibrant hues, the shimmering arcs of a rainbow. Autumn arrives, heralded by the retreat of summer. It's a season of harvest, the culmination of days spent under the sun. The rose of spring reappears, reminding us of the cyclical nature of existence. The hearthstone fire crackles, its warm glow reflecting her inner vitality. Autumn's embers linger, their warmth lasting through December. When snow falls, it cloaks the trees but never penetrates their core. The promise of spring lies dormant, awaiting the miracle of rebirth. Winter, with its icy winds and frosty specters, stalks the weed flowers. Snow crystals bar the growth of life, asserting their icy reign. Yet within her cabin, Cynthia remains safe, snug, and whole. Winter is but life in a state of pause, a brief interlude before the melting snows feed the spring waters, heralding the cycle's renewal. As we journey through the seasons of our lives, we come to understand that they mirror our own cycles of growth and retreat, flourishing and fading. The cyclical nature of seasons, much like life itself, is a testament to the resilience of existence, a reminder that after every winter, a spring is sure to follow. Through the changing seasons, we learn to appreciate the beauty of transformation and the promise of renewal that lies within each ending.
Crystal Memories. From her hilltop cabin of logs, Cynthia recalls the ice once in her veins, the freeze. Lo, the Canadian lilacs have bloomed at last. Nature springs from winter's tomb, the bloom already in the seed, the tree already contained within the acorn. Crystal fragments remain, sharp memories of the ventures in which she shattered not. Surging sprigs sprout from the soil. Spring showers make the summer flower. All the seasonings arrive at her door, for all things come round to those who observe. Summer wakes from spring's dying kiss, blooming when the rose does, sunning after the spring's running. She could never be too warm, for she'd endured the frost. The kaleidoscope revolves life's cycle. Summer rains upon the land, eventually fading in the night. Life's second bloom shines upon middle age, colors her mind, its rainbows shimmering. Autumn falls as summer leaves, harvesting its sum of days, seconding the rose of spring. The hearthstone fire glows heartily with herself as she stokes the flames of the wondering soul. The smile meets the tear. Fall's embers last through December. It snows atop the trees, ne'er falling in, entombing a spring that waits for the miracle. Ice winds stalk the weed flowers, the ghosts frosting the dead stalks, and snow crystals barring all that grows. She's in the cabin safe, snug, warm, and whole. Winter is death cooled over. Melting snows feed spring waters.
Sally knew it was time to come in from the cold. She had all she needed. She thought about taking a late lunch and not coming back, but this would have been too suspicious, so she bade her time, leaving at the usual quitting time, knowing that she would never see this place again. Sally was a deep penetration agent, reporting directly to Number 1 East, working for the top execs of a new cosmetic research corporation. They had even invented a better Botox, but there was more to it, and Sally had it. Her air of silliness had made them oblivious to her. They not even always closing their doors during meetings. No one knew how to keep a secret in this world. The put-on of her demeanor of joyful bantering talk had been quite convincing, for it was but an extension of her nature. Now she had alarming proof that the conspiracy lived on in a new and more desperate way. Just before leaving, she inserted a loophole into the firewall of the corporation. It would probably hold up until the morning shift came in. Much prepared for her retirement, she retrieved the contour analysis from its safe spot and placed it in a Ziploc pouch and carefully sealed it, putting it in her coffee thermos, then filled it with yucky office coffee, doing all of this out of sight within her desk drawer. She had found the revealing visage imposed on another just the day before in an exec's wastebasket that had not yet been dumped into the shredder chute. This had been a flaw in their system, and there were always such openings to be discovered. Not that they had been so careless overall, but the fruition of their plan was just 2 weeks away, and so perhaps they had become overconfident. The scent of cigar smoke wafting from a meeting had been the first real clue. Sometimes, when she left the complex, they had x-rayed or even opened her thermos, but today they just waved her on since there was a crowd. Not that they would have found it or even made anything of it. What she had was a 3D type grid sheet of a human head, as might have been used to guide a plastic surgeon, but this one was much more advanced than that. Sally boarded the subway, as usual, and stuck her cell phone deep into the seat where it met the uprise, then got off at the next stop. Her employers would waste time later on chasing a subway car. There had been no need for her to go to her apartment, for she had already packed her bags into a new vehicle provided by the Ninja Empire. Their protective eyes followed her travels, but of course she could not see them. She drove off to the airport relaxed, for all of her relatives and close friends had been moved to safe houses. Once there, she made a copy of the sectioned face and mailed it off, keeping the original. Using an alias, she bought a ticket for a flight to the country that Michael had moved to.
Here on the opposite side of the world from Hawaii was another cross-directional pathway, where west met east, in the two countries that Turkey sat atop, Iraq and Iran, the crossroads that so many would-be conquerors had been necessarily drawn through, the Persia of old that Alexander the Great, among many, had trodden over. He even marrying thousands of his troops to the locals. The techs at the Yin Ninja Center had already begun a massive download through the crack-in firewall of the Cosmetics Corporation, and were about halfway through when the opening closed, for the corporation complex had begun to self-destruct, a sure sign of conspiracy involvement. Yes, Sally had them right on. Trish, the Noma that Grandmaster East preferred, reviewed the synopsis of the data, sitting in the control room bunker with her husband, Michael. They noted an undue amount of biological cellular data. In fact, it appeared to be at the leading edge of the field. Michael, did not Rascal uncover some grotesque cloning attempts in the Virginia raid? Yes, but they were not viable, being failures in the end, as we've deduced from the videos. Well, those were playthings compared to what we see now. They've abandoned what DNA can but slowly accomplish. They're now arranging body cells directly under the pretense of cosmetic restoration, utilizing the cell's antenna to speed up the process immensely. So the rich could fund this endeavor and obtain growth and vitality in their aging faces and bodies without the loss of feeling, as with the numbness of Botox. Or even obtain a new and different face. Sally arrived at the center, removed her disguise of the wig and glasses, and was checked through security, correctly answering some personal questions, such as one about a handsome zookeeper, and then was whisked into the control room. "Hi, Trish, Michael," gushed Sally as her enthusiastic self, as she embraced and hugged them both. "Silly Sally, what do you have for us?" asked Trish. "Chernov is no longer Chernov." "What?" cried Trish. "Alexei!" Sally poured them some coffee, fishing out the picture of the head of state-to-be. Michael interjected, "This is the likes of Alexei Chernov, the one who just won what they call an election. He is to ascend to the office in a few days." Trish added, "He will then hold the keys to the kingdom and to the nuclear codes." "My God, a conspirator in charge of Russia!" Trish continued. "Sally, did you tell anyone?" "No one. To keep a secret, tell no one and leave no traces." "Good, Sally. For they don't know that we know, for this picture was not in their database. But the DIA-CIA cannot take out a head of state by order of the president, whether retired, serving, or one elected to be."
Can we take him out? Yes, someone has to, but there can be no connection to the intelligence units of any countries with which we are now allied. Any sign of their involvement could lead to World War III. Well, at least until Chernov's government does an autopsy on him and learns that he is a replacement. Get me my West counterbalance. Meanwhile, check everything out and match the serial numbers on the picture to the data we've extracted from the corporation. Number 1. West had already gotten up in the middle of the night to review the data and had picked up his phone just as it was about to ring. West here. How are you, Trish? A crisis has come to my house. I know the feeling well. Should we take him out? After extreme confirmation, of course. Yes, but I'm engaged with ongoing missions on all sides here, as you know. This region of mine is even more volatile now than just after the DC incident. I need someone traceable to nowhere, someone good with a rifle and a rocket launcher. One who can run like the wind. Rehearsals are not an option. The window opens in 3 days, for that is when Chernov gives his victory rally. There may be other chances, but there will be major difficulties after he takes office. Plus, he may act instantly with the nukes before we can get to him or anyone can detect a difference in him. I know, and I know that you know that I know, but it still helps to talk it all out. We have some new and traceless members in readiness training now, but you'll be needing just one to go in, right? And 2 or 3 for support? Yes, we'll have to keep it simple and do it the old-fashioned way. There's no time. I will send you all the details shortly. There is also a reference to some kind of older program that we've translated as a finishing class. It is in New Persia. It could be a backup plan or even a longer-range plan engaged previously to the cosmetics breakthrough. We'll need Western Field Command for a large mission like this if it's on. We are overextended here and we don't have any teams available or that can be recalled in time. Find this a finishing place. West can plan this one while we plan the fake Chernov's demise. The world is still tense around here. If the US or any other major country is implicated, there may come an end to the world. So we need this unknown person of West's, one outside of all the paramilitary units. Graham was one of the newbies on training duty this month. He had just spent weeks on the machines, target practice, and the everyday running on the track, even giving up smoking. He had been dreaming of building a house in the clouds, which was one of the reasons that he had accepted the mission. West called Eastback. My man Frederick has just retranslated the finishing class term of interest to charm school. I am not so happy with the implications of it. They are again trying to infiltrate countries' infrastructures with their own conspirators, only they are desperate. And so they are training suitable-looking foreigners in the ways of the West, hoping to move them up quickly in the aftermath of whatever Chernov has in mind to inflict on us. I'll take care of this spy college plan while you figure out Chernov. One more thing, West. Chernov is addressing all the military units in his election victory rally. They will be in full gear and will have tanks along and all that. They will probably not be armed, but who knows, for this madman may demand some kind of gun-firing salute to better bond him with the troops. It's a pep talk to his future deputies from their next fearless leader. I'll break this wonderful news to the men I'm sending to you, including a select few to support the job and one to go in, just as soon as Thomas Vale concurs. We need stealth, which might not come from a large group, for that would only attract attention and leave some stragglers around to be captured and tortured into telling. Plus, most of my people are busy too, working with the US DHS right now. Hold on, I'm getting it from Vale right now. It's a go. West next called Field Command. Rascal answering for Rascal now was Field Command. "Rascal here," Puff said as he picked up the green phone. "Get your best team on an SST and strike the charm school just after Chernov has met his maker. Are you ready for this, old friend? You're going in dead cold with little reconnaissance. It may not go very well. You will have 2 copters disguised with the region's markings, one for your command oversight and one for your assault team, but the copters are not a perfect match to what they have there, for then their pedals would operate in reverse and such, but we don't need any confusion like that now. They won't notice at night. Sorry for the short notice, but they might quickly dismantle the place when they realize that we know about Chernov and more." "We're ready, Master. I've been following the latest developments." A tugboat dropped Graham near some high cliffs just north of the Deepwater harbor. The tug looked like a piece of junk, having many old and ratty tires roped onto it all around. Graham quickly found the side path and walked up and around the cliffs, then on through a forest, noting the landmarks and the alternate paths, then out and up towards the high ground near the site, the rally to begin in but a few minutes. Any pursuers coming up after the deed was done would have to use up their time on the climb. The hill had probably already been searched by security, Graham would seize the first opportunity and then try to make it back through the woods to the shore and then to the tug, just as it was routinely motoring by. The tug would not wait. It could not wait and just sit there, arousing suspicion. Graham had been on the cross-country track team in high school. His escape would be akin a Sunday walk in the park unless the troops' weapons were loaded.
The anthem played. Graham took this time to adjust his sights and account for a slight breeze. There would be a brief introductory speech. Off stage, in the wings, the new Chernoff thought of how easy it had been. Well, not the lengthy and laborious cell treatments, but about his replacement of the real Chernoff. The old Chernoff had even unwittingly aided them by wandering away from the compound for some solitude from the claustrophobia of the campaign. The guards were frantic. But then, I as he had returned after a while, even glibly claiming that I felt like a new man, but that I needed to sleep. Even the practice voice went over well. Luckily, or taken into account, old Chernoff had no wife or children who could have or would have known that he was now a changed man. Meanwhile, Rascal's team was approaching the site of the charm school. It was heavily fenced in, an expected omen, and there was a clearing made for helicopter landings, of which this would be just another such. Rascal would land his command ship a ways away, overseeing the action through the reports and video. Only the troop Healy would land within the site, all of the troops wearing full body armor and led by Analog. It was already 10 p.m., but all were probably not yet asleep, a problem that had to be dealt with. But then again, they might not all be sober either, or even otherwise occupied. Back at the rally, Graham noted the starry sky, thinking of the toe for a second. Luckily, the moon was not a factor. It was 8:10 p.m. The first laser rifle shot would fell the man, just after the red dot appeared on him. Then a rifle burst of shots to be certain would be followed by a rocket that would blast the entire vicinity of the podium. The military audience would be stunned at first, much taken by surprise, and perhaps paralyzed for a while, during which he would flee like a bat out of hell. Chernoff walked on stage to a mighty applause and took to the podium. Graham inched forward and lay prone, making some final adjustments, as Chernoff began to lay out his vision for a new order. Graham steadied, then held, then fired. Chernoff was hit, and he stopped speaking, no one but him yet realizing. Chernoff held fast onto the podium. He knew. Next came the burst of laser-guided bullets, Graham using all but one, then calmly switched to the rocket rifle, aiming carefully and setting loose the charge. Not waiting to gauge the reaction, Graham confirmed the kill and took off, wondering if the military men's weapons were loaded. Nothing happened until he got to the woods. It was an eerie interlude.
Then it happened all at once. Every soldier was firing in Graham's general direction, and some tanks could be heard roaring to life. The trees were a shield of sorts, and so Graham headed through the denser sections, still keeping sight of the main path that would guide him on. This was cross-country at its finest. He had to hurtle over fallen timbers that slowed him down but slightly. Hot metal rained down all around. This was much worse than expected, and the firing was on the increase. Tree bark flew off right and left and overhead from a hailstorm of bullets. A fragment stung into his shoulder. Slowing to a jogging pace, Graham jammed a cauterizer into his wound to stop the bleeding, then sprinted ever faster, fueled by the adrenaline from danger. The sounds of falling trees far behind meant that the tanks were coming, and soon their thunderous rounds ripped through the forest like large bowling balls. Graham slowed, eventually, waiting for a second wind. Where was it? He'd figured the path of the tanks, not good. He would have to circle wide and then back. Precious time would be lost. His new house would most likely be in the paradise of heaven and not in the mountains of British Columbia. He was off with his second wind and then took more shrapnel in his arm, stopping briefly to wrap it. He would have been setting a speed record if the course was as straight as it was supposed to be, but it wasn't, and so the agony finally came, that time always feared by long-distance runners, the wall. Back at the charm school site, Rascal had gotten the news of Chernov's fall, and had his assault team land in their chopper, putting his command chopper down well outside the site at the same time. Guards sauntered out of the guardhouse after a minute or two, a fatal mistake. Analog's team then raced into the compound, setting explosives. Resistance seemed light for the size of the place, but was more than enough to contend with. The primary aim of the mission was to put the place out of operation, but leave enough of it for the world to see and note the scope of the treachery. Rascal watched the video and ran some of the high-level strategy, but could hardly believe what he saw on screen. There was an entire mocked-up village of typical Americana. Banks, hair salons, drugstores, a movie theater, even houses with picket fences. It was an entire town with a Main Street, USA, running right through it, just as DeMille once wrote an entire book about. This large operation evidently was to train American-looking foreigners to infiltrate and operate in the United States. Some of the residents looked to be the White Russians found in the north.
Graham had finally made it through the forest to the clearing near the cliffs, sinking to one knee to catch his breath and look for the tugboat. Damn, he had missed the tug. It was already passing by and heading off. He couldn't be taken alive, for that was the deal. He had one bullet left. He could hear the troops and the tanks in the distance, perhaps but 3 minutes away. He sighted his laser rifle on the departing tug, steadied his bleeding arm, then pulled the trigger, and rang the ship's bell with his last bullet. The tug began to turn around. There would be no time to take the side path down to the water, so Graham ran toward the cliff, faster and ever faster, for he had to be sure to clear some protrusions down below, then jumped, far out, sailing through the air, and dropped like a stone, just straightening out at the last moment and knifing into the water near the oncoming tug. Greybeard quickly fished the exhausted Graham out of the water and dragged him aboard, then powered the engines to full speed and headed the ship out to sea at an amazing pace for a mere tugboat. "Why were you leaving me?" Graham wondered aloud. "I wasn't leaving you, man. I had to keep moving so as to not draw attention. I heard the ruckus above. My God, their weapons were loaded." Indeed. What's under the hood of this thing? Gleaming new double engines. Graham looked back. Uh-oh, there's a tank setting up on the cliff and we're the only ship in sight. "No problem, I'm evading now." The tug began a zigzag. "You're making me seasick." "Better than dead. By the way, good job up there." "Thanks, but they're firing at us." The tank round landed way out ahead. They didn't gauge the down positioning. They soon will. No sweat. Why are you so calm? This is one of our easier missions. At about that moment, some kind of missile whizzed by from the totally opposite direction and smashed into the cliffs, shattering them. It seemed as if the tank was suspended in the air for a few long seconds before it crashed into the sea below. "I'm still sweating it, Greybeard. This tug doesn't have enough fuel to cross the ocean. Plus there are 3 helicopters taking off now." "Don't worry, I'm hoisting a pirate flag." "Great news. Greybeard, I like to worry about these things. Hey, I know that flag from TowQuest. Whatever fired that missile is here to pick us up. They don't tell me everything. I don't see anything out there. Hold on, there it is. It looks like a bathtub. It's the conning tower of a submarine. Coming closer, they saw some really aware person popping out of a hatch. It was Popper. "Get over here, you guys, move it, swim." They climbed in. "This is your rig, Popper," they both said at once. "Yes, it's one of them. Have to make the moolah." "Where to?" "To the deep," Popper commanded into his phone. "Then fire torpedoes and engage all sonar." "That's my personal boat, Popper," cried Greybeard. "We'll get you a new one." Analog's team was now deep into the charm school compound and nearly finished, and then everything went bad. Armed men were pouring out from what must have been a vast underground complex with many exits, they almost surrounding the ninja team. These were the very spies that were being trained in American ways by the captured American pilots and soldiers. Analog called for an abort and an evacuation, setting off all the remaining explosives to buy some time. But there were so many adversaries that they were able to quickly regroup and begin a large pursuit of Analog's team. Rascal ordered his command ship pilot to lift off and land in the center of the compound. His craft landed well in front of the enemies to cover the retreat of his troops, his gunner firing and eventually exhausting both door guns of the copter. The chopper began to take some fire, and so Rascal ordered it off, he staying behind. Analog, meet me in the clearing near the fence in 10 minutes. Don't be early or you'll be a sitting duck. Don't be late or I will be one. The enemy was recovering, regrouping again. There must have been thousands of them. Analog's troops would need some time to get back and board their helicopter. Rascal didn't figure on making it back himself. He gauged the wind from the smoke that was blowing about, then threw some canisters off and away into a rough semicircle about him, then retreated in a hurry as the relentless masses began approaching. The deadly nerve gas slowed the enemy waves, felling them after a moment or two, but many in the rear then began circling wide around as a flanking maneuver. What madmen, they are like fearless robots. Rascal ran like never before, glad to see and hear Analog's troop assault team's copter taking off and rising in the distance, but as he neared the guardhouse, some new guards must have just come on duty and had just stepped out. Rascal couldn't go forward and he couldn't go back. Suddenly someone mowed down the guards with a machine gun blast. It was Analog, who had stayed behind. Analog, you fox. I'm going to press your tow quest thanks button 1,000 times if we get out of this mess. However, there are many enemies due to come about and around right here very soon. They ran to the center of the clearing. They had gotten to it about a minute or two early. Our punctuality may have cost us our lives, Analog. Yes, but I hate being late, Rascal.
Sure enough, they could see movement behind the tree line. "Here they come," said Rascal. The enemies emerged, still too far away to fire, but fired anyway, moving inexorably closer. Rascal and Analog moved back a bit, this but a futile gesture. They were ready for death. "It's been a blast, Rascal. It's not over yet." Suddenly the enemy troops began to slow, then stumbled and fell to the ground. I placed my last canister of nerve gas back there, Analog, knowing that the wind was blowing slowly this way, even though it will soon be upon us, granting us death as well. Rascal then felt a slight tingle, as did Analog. "Don't worry, Analog, it's just some stray molecules of the nerve gas wafting on ahead." "I'm not worried, but I do see more enemies arriving from another direction. We may not die from the gas, but from bullets?" Time slowed to a crawl, so close yet so far. "Any more tricks, Rascal? The mass of the nerve gas is near upon us. The enemy draws closer to watch us die." "One last hope." There was a whir and a whoosh. The downwash of the rotor blades of Rascal's command chopper landing from on high spreads the incoming nerve gas outward, in fact propelling it towards the onrushing conspirators, which doomed them. That's why the early bird always gets the worm, Analog.
They ran to the center of the clearing. They had gotten to it about a minute or two early. Our punctuality may have cost us our lives, Analog.
Yes, but I hate being late, Rascal.
Sure enough, they could see movement behind the tree line. Here they come. The enemies emerged, still too far away to fire, but fired anyway, moving inexorably closer. Rascal and Analog moved back a bit, this but a futile gesture. They were ready for death.
It's been a blast, Rascal.
It's not over yet. Suddenly the enemy troops began to slow, then stumbled and fell to the ground. I placed my last canister of nerve gas back there, Analog, knowing that the wind was blowing slowly this way, even though it will soon be upon us, granting us death as well. Rascal then felt a slight tingle, as did Analog. "Don't worry, Analog, it's just some stray molecules of the nerve gas wafting on ahead."
I'm not worried, but I do see more enemies arriving from another direction. We may not die from the gas, but from bullets.
Time slowed to a crawl, so close yet so far.
Any more tricks, Rascal? The mass of the nerve gas is near upon us. The enemy draws closer to watch us die.
One last hope. There was a whir and a whoosh. The downwash of the rotor blades of Rascal's command chopper landing from on high spreads the incoming nerve gas outward, in fact propelling it towards the onrushing conspirators, which soon dooms them. That's why the early bird always gets the worm, Analog.